At my daughter's 8th birthday party, she looked up at me and said, "I think I had too much medicine candy." I laughed. "What medicine candy, baby?" I noticed her hand trembling as she held onto the table. Beside me, my husband Theodore and my mother-in-law exchanged looks. "The one from Grandma's locked box," my daughter Zara responded. "Sweetie, Grandma doesn't give you medicine. Maybe you're thinking of regular candy?" "No, Mommy, the special white pills that make me pretty." Mackenzie started backing toward her purse. "I think we should open presents." "What pills, Mackenzie?" I said, standing slowly. "They're just vitamins for her immune system." "Then why hide them from me?" My voice was deadly calm. Why tell an 8-year-old to keep secrets from her mother? My blood turned to ice as everything started to make more sense. Her mysterious illness, the random liver failure, how the doctors could never figure out what was going on. "Are you giving my daughter medication without my knowledge?" Mackenzie fumbled with her purse. "They're perfectly safe." I snatched it from her, dumping the contents. Receipts scattered across the floor. International pharmacy websites. And there, wrapped in a silk scarf, a bottle of pills. Glutathione skin whitening supplements, 5,000 milligrams. I read the label with shaking hands. Maximum adult dose 500 milligrams. I saw Mackenzie's phone had fallen out too. The screen was still on, showing a photo album. I picked it up and nearly vomited. Progress pictures of Zara. Weekly photos showing her skin getting lighter. Annotations like, week 1, finally seeing results. And, month 6, almost there. I looked at my daughter's beautiful brown skin, at the dark circles under her eyes, at how thin she'd gotten. Her liver failing, her skin whitening, everything that seemed like it had no source. It was always you. Mackenzie protested. "It's just to help her." "Help her what?" I screamed. "Help her be white. She's 8 years old. She almost died," I said, my voice breaking. 3 times. "Do you understand that? 3 times I held her hand while machines kept her alive." Theodore finally spoke. "Mom was just trying to—" "You knew?" I whirled on him. The guilt on his face confirmed everything. "You knew she was poisoning our baby?" "It's not like that," he said weakly. "They're supplements, not poison." "She had a seizure in my arms," I said. "In the grocery store. People thought she was dying. I thought she was dying. I quit my job," I continued, tears streaming. "Senior marketing manager at my dream job. 15 years building my career, gone, because someone had to be with her full time." I laughed bitterly. "Our son doesn't even know me anymore," I said. "Elijah drew a family picture at school last week. Want to know who wasn't in it? Me." I looked at Mackenzie. "While you charged $400 a month to your credit card for pills from Thailand." The memory hit me like a slap. "Oh my gosh, the CPS calls." Theodore went rigid. "That was because of you." I remembered the whispers at pickup. Zara's breathing had become shallow, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Every black mother at school, they'd stop talking when I walked up. "Look what she's doing to that beautiful child," they'd say. Mackenzie's face was stone. "I didn't know about—" "You stood right there." Zara started crying. Her words came out slurred. "I'm sorry, Mommy. Grandma said if I'm pretty, Daddy won't leave us for Ashley." The room went silent. "What did you just say, baby?" "Grandma promised," she sobbed. "She said when I'm white enough, Daddy will love me and won't leave like he wants to." I turned to Theodore. "Who's Ashley?" His face went gray. "She's nobody. The one from your LinkedIn? Regional manager at your company?" My voice was rising. "The one you had coffee with last month for networking?" Theodore's phone buzzed on the counter. He lunged for it, but I was faster. "Text from my MIL sent just now. Don't let her stop treatment now. Dr. Kim says we're close." I shot up. "Who the hell is Dr. A. Kim?" "She's a dermatologist," Mackenzie said quickly. Behind her, Zara's legs buckled slightly. "Madison's mom from Zara's class." I scrolled up through the messages. "Increased dose. She's responding well. Skin is definitely lighter." I took a deep breath. "You're coordinating this? Both of you?" Suddenly Zara's eyes rolled to the back of her head. She collapsed, her tiny body convulsing on the floor. "Zara!" I screamed, dropping to my knees. She was seizing violently, foam tinged with blood coming from her mouth. "Stay with Mommy, sweetheart. I've got you." The door burst open. Our son Elijah stood there in his pajamas. "Is Zara dying again?" His voice was flat, emotionless. My 7-year-old son had seen this so many times it didn't even scare him anymore. "Call 911. I screamed at Theodore, who stood frozen. "Call them now." I turned Zara on her side, timing the seizure. The blood was getting darker. "I'm calling the police." I reached for my phone, but Mackenzie grabbed my wrist. "No, you can't. Look at her skin. It's working. She's so much lighter than before." I wrenched away, but Theodore caught me from behind, his arms tight around me. "I'm sorry," he sobbed, tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry, but we're doing what's best for her, for our family." With strength I didn't know I had, I broke free and lunged for my phone, but Mackenzie got there first. She snatched it and dialed 911 herself. "Hello? Yes, my granddaughter is having a seizure. Her mother has been giving her skin whitening pills." My blood ran cold. "She's been bleaching her own baby." "I just found the pills. Please hurry." Theodore stared at his mother in shock. The front door crashed open and Rita Simmons rushed in with her medical bag, her partner right behind carrying an oxygen tank. Harvey Guthrie followed them, his hand on his radio while his eyes swept the room, taking in everything. Mackenzie immediately started pointing at me and talking loud and fast about how she just found out I'd been giving Zara dangerous pills from the internet. I grabbed the glutathione bottle from where it had fallen and tried to show it to Harvey, but Mackenzie kept stepping between us and talking over me. Rita dropped to her knees beside Zara and her hands moved fast, checking my daughter's pulse at her neck. The seizure had stopped, but Zara wasn't moving and her chest barely rose and fell with each breath. Her lips had this blue color that made my stomach drop because I'd seen it before during her worst episodes. Rita's partner knelt down and started setting up the oxygen mask, while Rita pulled out a small flashlight and checked Zara's pupils. I pushed past Mackenzie and shoved the bottle at Harvey, explaining these were what was poisoning my daughter. I told him my mother-in-law had been secretly giving them to her for months, that they were skin-whitening pills at 10 times the safe dose. Harvey took the bottle and turned it over in his hands, then pulled out his notebook and started writing. His eyes kept moving between me and Mackenzie, who was still insisting I was the one who bought them online. Theodore suddenly came alive and started yelling at his mother, asking her why she lied to the emergency operator. His face was red and his hands were shaking as he demanded to know what she was thinking. Mackenzie's whole face changed and went cold like I'd never seen before. She said she was protecting her granddaughter from an abusive mother who would rather see her child sick than beautiful. The way she said it so calm and planned made me realize this wasn't panic. She'd been thinking about this accusation for a while. Rita looked up from Zara and announced we needed to transport immediately because her oxygen levels were too low. She asked who was riding in the ambulance with the patient. I started moving toward my daughter, but Harvey stepped right in front of me and held up his hand. He said given the conflicting accusations, both Mackenzie and I needed to stay here to give statements. He said Theodore could go with the child since he had parental rights too, and they needed to sort out the facts first. I screamed that my baby needed me and started trying to push past him, but he stayed firm. I told him I had evidence on Mackenzie's phone that proved she did this, that I had screenshots of everything. Harvey looked torn for a second, but said they had procedures to follow, and Theodore was the child's father. Rita and her partner had already gotten Zara onto their stretcher and were wheeling her toward the door. I watched my unconscious daughter disappear out the door with my husband, who knew about the poisoning, walking beside her. My chest felt like it was crushed and I couldn't breathe right. That's when Elijah appeared at the top of the stairs with his backpack already on his shoulders. He said he was going to stay at his friend's house like he always did when Zara got sick. The way he said it, so matter of fact, like this was just another Tuesday, made something crack inside me. I told him to wait because I needed him here, that this time was different. He just shrugged and sat on the stairs like he'd been through this routine too many times to care. Harvey told us he was separating Mackenzie and me into different rooms while we waited for another officer. He put Mackenzie in the kitchen and me in the dining room where I could still see the spot where Zara had been seizing. I pulled out my phone and started working fast, forwarding myself every screenshot I'd taken from Mackenzie's phone earlier. The progress photos showing Zara getting lighter week by week made me sick all over again. The texts with Dr. Kim about increasing doses and being close to their goal. The pharmacy receipts showing hundreds of dollars spent every month on pills from Thailand. I made sure everything was saved in multiple places because I knew Mackenzie would try to delete it all. Through the wall, I could hear Mackenzie on the phone with someone, probably her lawyer, talking about false accusations and parental alienation. I wonder what's really driving Mackenzie to keep insisting the mother did this when Theodore just saw her with the pills. There's something odd about how quickly she flipped that story to the 911 operator, like she had that excuse ready to go. About 20 minutes later, another officer arrived, a woman who introduced herself, but I was too upset to catch her name. She sat across from me at the dining table and asked me to start from the beginning. I walked her through everything, how Zara had been mysteriously sick for almost 2 years with liver problems no doctor could explain, how she'd had 3 near-death experiences that required hospitalization, and how I'd quit my job to care for her. I showed her my phone with all the evidence I'd gathered, the photos, the texts, everything. She wrote it all down and asked detailed questions about dates and times and which doctors we'd seen. I told her about finding the pills just now, about the 5,000 milligram dose when the maximum safe amount for an adult was 500 milligrams. I showed her the text Mackenzie had sent Theodore about Dr. Kim saying they were close to their goal. The officer's face got more serious with each piece of evidence I showed her. Harvey came back into the room after about an hour and said they needed to go to the hospital to check on the child's condition. He said they'd determine if charges were warranted based on what the doctors found and the evidence collected. He told me neither Mackenzie nor I could leave town and that he was particularly interested in talking to this Dr. Kim person. He said someone would be in touch within 24 hours about next steps and that I should get a lawyer immediately. The second Harvey's car pulled away, I ran back inside and grabbed Elijah, who was still standing on the stairs. I told him we were going to the hospital right now and he just nodded and went to get his tablet. My hands shook as I buckled him into the back seat and started driving way too fast toward the hospital. I called my sister on speaker and she picked up on the second ring. When I told her about the glutathione pills at 5,000 milligrams, she went quiet for a long moment. Then she started explaining how glutathione overdose destroys a child's liver cells and causes something called oxidative stress. She said at that dose, Zara's liver was basically being poisoned every single day. She told me the damage might be permanent and I had to pull over because I couldn't see through my tears. Elijah asked from the back seat if Zara was going to need a new liver, and I couldn't even answer him. We got to the hospital and I practically dragged Elijah through the emergency room doors. Theodore was sitting in the waiting room with his head in his hands looking completely destroyed. When he saw us, he stood up and started walking toward me, but I held up my hand to stop him. He told me they'd taken Zara straight to dialysis because her kidneys were shutting down from the toxins. He tried to say he was sorry, but I cut him off and told him to save it for court. I told him we were done pretending to be a family after what he let happen to our baby. His face crumpled and he started crying, but I felt nothing but cold anger. About an hour later, Dr. Savannah Maloney came out in her scrubs looking serious. She sat us down and explained that Zara was stable but critical with clear signs of chronic glutathione poisoning. Her liver enzymes were through the roof and her kidney function was at 30%. She said they'd already notified CPS as mandatory reporters since this was obvious child endangerment. She told us both parents would need to be interviewed and cooperated fully with the investigation. Theodore asked if Zara would be okay, and Savannah said it was too early to tell. She said the next 48 hours would be critical, and they were doing everything they could. A man in a rumpled suit showed up about an hour later and introduced himself as Albert Stein from CPS. He looked tired and had coffee stains on his tie like he'd been up all night. He asked to speak with me first, and we went to a small conference room off the main waiting area. I showed him everything on my phone, including the screenshots of Mackenzie's progress photos of Zara getting lighter. I showed him the text between Mackenzie and Theodore about Dr. Kim and increasing the dose. I showed him the receipt photos from the international pharmacy websites charging $400 a month. Albert wrote everything down in a small notebook and asked detailed questions about dates and times. He wanted to know when Zara first got sick and how many times she'd been hospitalized. He asked if I'd ever suspected anything, and I had to admit I hadn't until today. While Albert went to interview Theodore, I called my best friend who works as a paralegal. She answered even though it was late and immediately gave me 3 names of family lawyers. She told me to document everything, including taking photos of Zara's condition and medical charts. She said to start a timeline of events while my memory was fresh because I'd need it for court. I started typing notes on my phone about everything that had happened in the last 2 years. About 2 hours later, I heard shouting from the lobby and ran out to see what was happening. Mackenzie was there with a man in an expensive suit trying to push past the security guard. She was screaming that I was keeping her from her granddaughter and that she had rights. The security guard was blocking her and saying she couldn't enter based on the ongoing investigation. She saw me and started yelling that I I was alienating her from Zara and poisoning everyone against her. Her lawyer was trying to calm her down, but she kept screaming about how she was trying to help. I went back to Zara's room and found Nina Kavanaugh waiting for me. She introduced herself as the hospital social worker and pulled me aside to talk. She explained that Zara would need to stay for at least a week for treatment and monitoring. She said with the conflicting accusations from both Mackenzie and me, CPS might place Zara in temporary foster care. She said they had to determine who the safe parent was, and that could take time. I felt my whole body go cold and told her I had evidence proving Mackenzie did this. Nina said she understood, but the process had to play out, and I should get a lawyer immediately. I stepped into the hallway and called Evie Harding, whose name my friend had given me. She answered her cell even though it was almost midnight and agreed to meet me at the hospital immediately. She told me to gather every piece of evidence I had, including medical records and texts. She said we'd probably have an emergency custody hearing within 48 hours, and I needed to be ready. That night, I slept in the chair beside Zara's bed holding her small hand. The machines beeped steadily, and I watched her oxygen levels like they might drop if I looked away. Around 3 in the morning, she woke up confused and asked where she was. When she asked for her daddy, I told her he wasn't here right now. She said good because she didn't want him to see her ugly with her dark skin coming back. My heart broke completely hearing my 8-year-old say those words. The next morning, Detective Lucas Byron showed up with a badge and a serious expression. He was thorough and asked me to go through everything again from the beginning. He took the pill bottle for testing and said he was getting a warrant for Mackenzie's financial records. He wanted to trace every purchase from the international pharmacies and build a timeline of the poisoning. He said this was now a criminal investigation, and both Mackenzie and Theodore could face serious charges. Lucas told me he'd be bringing in Dr. Kim for questioning that afternoon, and I should stay close to my phone. 2 hours later, he called from the station saying she'd shown up with her lawyer acting all confused and innocent. She kept insisting she only gave friendly advice about vitamins and had no idea what Mackenzie was actually doing. Lucas said her whole act fell apart when he pulled out Mackenzie's phone and showed her their text messages right there on the screen. The one where she wrote about increasing the dose made her go pale. Then the one where she mentioned the specific brand from Thailand made her lawyer start whispering in her ear real fast. She finally admitted she'd been advising Mackenzie about skin brightening, but claimed she thought it was just topical creams, not pills. Lucas told her to expect criminal charges and that the medical board would be getting a full report by tomorrow. The next morning, Theodore showed up at the hospital trying to see Zara, but the security guard stopped him at the elevator. I'd had Evie file an emergency protection order the night before, and they were ready for him. The process server was actually waiting in the lobby and handed him the papers right there in front of everyone. Theodore started crying and begging the guard to just let him see his daughter for 5 minutes. The guard called me in Zara's room and I told him absolutely not, that Theodore was dangerous to our children. I could hear Theodore sobbing through the phone, but I felt nothing except cold determination to keep my kids safe from him and his mother. Later that day, Albert from CPS showed up with his supervisor, a woman who looked like she'd been doing this job way too long. They needed to interview Elijah, and I had to bring him to the hospital from my friend's house where he'd been staying. Elijah sat in the family conference room swinging his legs and told them everything in his flat little voice. He talked about how Grandma always gave Zara special medicine when Mommy wasn't home. He said she made Zara promise not to tell and gave her extra toys when she took the pills without complaining. Then he mentioned that Daddy knew because he saw him watching once, and Daddy just said they were vitamins to help Zara feel better. The supervisor wrote everything down while Albert asked gentle follow-up questions about how often this happened. Elijah said it was every time Grandma babysat, which was usually twice a week when I was at work. After the interview, the CPS supervisor pulled me aside and explained they needed to implement a safety plan immediately. Oh wow, the way Elijah remembers every detail about the medicine giving is really interesting. How does a kid his age notice and remember all those specific things about Grandma's behavior? She said Zara would stay in my custody, but Theodore would only get supervised visits at a county facility if he wanted them. Mackenzie was completely banned from any contact with either child pending the criminal investigation. She said it wasn't perfect, but it was better than removing the children to foster care while they sorted everything out. I agreed to all their terms and signed the paperwork right there, my hand shaking as I wrote my name. Evie met me at the hospital that afternoon with a stack of legal documents an inch thick. She'd filed for emergency temporary custody and gotten us a hearing date for the next morning at 9. She said with all the evidence we had, especially the CPS safety plan and the criminal investigation, we should get temporary full custody no problem. But she warned me Theodore would probably hire someone good and fight back hard. She was right because that evening I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was Ashley saying she was sorry about everything that was happening and wanted me to know Theodore had been staying at her apartment since the night Zara went to the hospital. I screenshotted immediately and forwarded it to Evie, who texted back that this was perfect evidence of abandonment for our custody case. She told me to save everything and not respond to Ashley at all. The emergency custody hearing the next morning was brutal, but thankfully quick. The judge was an older woman who looked disgusted as she read through the medical evidence about Zara's poisoning. She reviewed the CPS report, and Albert's supervisor testified about the safety concerns with both Theodore and Mackenzie. The judge asked Theodore's lawyer a few sharp questions about why his client hadn't protected his daughter from obvious abuse. Within an hour, she granted me temporary full custody with Theodore getting supervised visits only at the county facility. She also issued a restraining order against Mackenzie requiring her to stay at least 500 feet away from both children at all times. Theodore tried to say something to the judge, but his lawyer grabbed his arm and made him sit back down. After court, Theodore followed me to the parking lot even though Evie told me to walk fast and not engage. He cornered me by my car, crying and begging me to understand that he never meant for things to go this far. He said he thought the pills were harmless, and his mom said they were just like vitamins that lots of people used. I looked him straight in the eye and told him he watched our daughter almost die 3 times and did nothing to stop it. I said that was all the understanding he'd ever get from me, and if he didn't move away from my car, I'd call the police. He backed up with his hands raised, and I drove away, watching him stand there in the parking lot getting smaller in my mirror. Back at the hospital that afternoon, Dr. Ed Maloney had good news for the first time in what felt like forever. Zara's liver function tests were finally starting to improve, and her numbers were trending in the right direction. She said if this continued, continued, Zara might not need a transplant after all, though she'd need monitoring for years to make sure there wasn't permanent damage. I actually cried from relief right there in the hallway, holding Zara's hand while she slept. It was the first time I'd felt any hope since finding those pills in Mackenzie's purse. That evening, Lucas called with an update that made everything feel more real. They'd arrested Mackenzie that afternoon on charges of child endangerment and assault with a deadly weapon. The deadly weapon was the pills which the lab confirmed contained not just glutathione, but several other unregulated compounds from the Thai pharmacy. Dr. Kim had also been arrested for practicing medicine without proper authorization and endangering a minor since she wasn't licensed to prescribe anything, especially not to children. Both of them were being held in county jail pending bail hearings the next morning. Lucas said the prosecutor was taking this very seriously and would probably ask for high bail given the severity of what they'd done to Zara. The next morning, I woke up on the hospital couch and realized I couldn't go back to that house where Mackenzie had poisoned my daughter for years. I called my friend Cindy, who worked with me before I quit, and she said her basement apartment was empty since her mom moved to Florida last month. She said we could stay there as long as we needed, even though it meant pulling Elijah out of his school mid-year and starting over 40 minutes away. I accepted immediately because anywhere was better than that house full of poison and lies. While I was packing a bag of clothes from the gift shop since I had nothing, Theodore's brother Sean called my phone. He said the whole family was in shock about what Mackenzie did, and nobody had any idea she was giving Zara those pills. He offered to wire $5,000 to help with the medical bills because he knew insurance would fight covering intentional poisoning. I wanted to refuse out of pride, but Zara needed care more than I needed dignity, so I gave him my account number and thanked him. The money hit my account within an hour, and I used it to pay the deposit on a storage unit for our things and bought basic supplies for when Zara got out. 3 days passed with Zara getting stronger each day, and finally the hospital therapist said she was stable enough to understand what happened to her. The therapist was this calm woman who specialized in medical trauma in kids, and she helped me find simple words to explain that Grandma gave her the wrong kind of medicine that made her sick. We sat together in Zara's room while I held her hand and told her that Grandma made bad choices with pills that hurt her body, and that's why she'd been so sick for so long. The therapist helped me explain that skin color doesn't make someone pretty or ugly, and that being brown like Mommy was beautiful and perfect. Zara cried and asked if Grandma hated her brown skin, and I had to tell her that Grandma was confused about what makes people special, but that confusion hurt Zara's body. That same night, Elijah wet the bed at Cindy's place for the third time since we'd been staying there. He'd been having nightmares where Zara died and he couldn't save her, waking up screaming and shaking. I found a therapist who took our insurance and specialized in kids who'd witnessed medical trauma, and after 2 sessions, Elijah finally started talking about how scared he was. He told the therapist he thought I loved Zara more because I spent all my time at the hospital with her and never played basketball with him anymore. The therapist helped him understand that sick sisters need more help, but that didn't mean less love for him. She gave us exercises to do together, like drawing our feelings and making a special notebook where Elijah could write questions for me when he felt scared. 2 days later, Evie called me with bad news while I was filling out Zara's discharge paperwork. She said Theodore had hired Kirk Baldwin, who she knew from other cases as the kind of lawyer who played dirty and won ugly. Kirk was already filing motions claiming I was alienating the children from their father and extended family. Evie said we needed to document everything from now on, including every text, every medical appointment, every therapy session, everything that proved I was the stable parent keeping the kids safe. She had me download an app that backed up all communications and told me to start a journal documenting the kids' daily care. I spent that night scanning hundreds of medical records and organizing them into folders while Zara slept. A week after Mackenzie got arrested, she made bail somehow, and the first thing she did was send a huge flower arrangement to Zara's hospital room. The card said she was praying for her granddaughter's recovery and hoped to see her soon, completely violating the restraining order the judge had issued. Hospital security called the police and showed them the delivery receipt with Mackenzie's name on it. The cops arrested her again that afternoon, and this time the judge revoked her bail completely, saying she'd shown she couldn't follow court orders. She'd stay in jail until her trial, which made me feel safer, but also worried about what she might do when she eventually got out. Finally, after 10 days in the hospital, Zara got discharged, but with a folder full of instructions that made my head spin. She needed liver function tests twice a week, 6 different medications at specific times, dietary restrictions, and monthly ultrasounds to monitor organ damage. The discharge coordinator handed me a bill estimate showing we already owed over $50,000 after insurance. The insurance company was refusing to cover most of it because the poisoning was intentional, not accidental, which they said was excluded from our policy. I signed payment plans I knew I couldn't afford and wheeled Zara out feeling overwhelmed, but grateful she was alive. We moved into Cindy's basement that weekend, and I tried to make it feel less like hiding and more like home. The space was small with concrete walls and tiny windows, but it was safe, and nobody there wanted to hurt my kids. Elijah helped me hang sheets to make a private corner for Zara with her stuffed animals and favorite blanket. He picked flowers from Cindy's garden to put by her bed and read her stories while she rested. It was the first time since this nightmare started that he showed real care for his sister instead of resentment. He even made her a card that said he was glad she was getting better and drew them playing together. 2 weeks later came Theodore's first supervised visit at the Family Services Center downtown. The supervisor was this tired-looking woman who'd clearly seen too many broken families, and she had strict rules about what Theodore could and couldn't discuss. The timing of Mackenzie making bail just to immediately violate the restraining order with flowers feels really odd to me. What was she thinking would happen when she put her name right on the delivery receipt? Within 10 minutes, Theodore was sobbing and begging Zara to forgive him for not protecting her. Zara got upset and started pulling at her skin, scratching until she drew blood while crying that she wanted to be white so Daddy would love her. The supervisor ended the visit after just 20 minutes and wrote in her report that Theodore needed therapy before more visits. She recommended extending the supervision period and requiring Theodore to complete a parenting class focused on protecting children from abuse. I held Zara while she sobbed in the car afterward, promising her that Daddy's love shouldn't depend on her skin color. That evening, Lucas called with the first good news in weeks. The detective said they'd gotten Mackenzie's credit card records and found purchases going back 2 whole years for various skin whitening pills from Thailand, the Philippines, and sketchy online pharmacies. She'd we'd spent over $10,000 total, increasing the doses over time as Zara's body built tolerance. They also found emails between Mackenzie and Dr. Kim discussing dosages and even one where Dr. Kim warned that the levels were getting dangerous. With this evidence, the prosecutor was confident about getting a conviction and said Theodore might face charges too for failure to protect a child. Lucas said the evidence was so clear that Mackenzie would probably take a plea deal to avoid a longer sentence, which meant Zara wouldn't have to testify. 3 days later, Harvey called to say I could go back to the house with police escort to get our stuff, and when we pulled up to what used to be home, my stomach turned seeing Theodore's car gone and the lawn already getting long. Harvey waited by the door while I went upstairs to Zara's room first, and what I found there made me run to the bathroom to throw up. Mackenzie had turned the closet into some kind of sick shrine with hundreds of photos taped to the walls showing Zara's skin getting lighter week by week, dates written in red marker, notes about dosages and which pills worked best. The dresser had more photos and frames, before and after shots she must have been planning to show someone, maybe that doctor. Kim and I grabbed trash bags and started throwing everything in while tears ran down my face. I packed Zara's clothes and toys fast, then moved to Elijah's room where everything looked normal except for the drawings hidden under his bed, showing our family with Zara colored in white crayon instead of brown. Harvey helped me carry boxes to my car, and I grabbed photo albums, important papers from the filing cabinet, the kids' birth certificates, my jewelry box, anything I thought we'd need to start over somewhere else. That night my phone rang and it was my old boss from the marketing firm asking how I was doing since she'd heard through LinkedIn about everything, and before I could even finish explaining, she offered me freelance work I could do from home while taking care of Zara. The pay was less than half my old salary, but with medical bills already hitting $40,000 and climbing, I said yes immediately, and she sent me the first project that same night, a social media campaign I could work on after the kids went to bed. 2 weeks passed before the divorce mediation that Evie warned me would be rough, and she was right, because Theodore showed up with Kirk, who spent the first hour claiming I was making everything up about the poisoning. Kirk actually stood there and told the mediator I probably bought those pills myself to frame Mackenzie, that I coached the kids to lie, that I was mentally unstable from the stress of Zara being sick. The mediator, this older woman who'd probably seen everything, kept looking at the medical records Evie brought, the police reports, the CPS findings, and finally she told Kirk to stop wasting everyone's time with obvious lies. Theodore sat there the whole time staring at his hands, not defending me but not backing up Kirk either, just this pathetic shell of the man I married 15 years ago. When the mediator asked him directly if he knew about the pills, he mumbled something about vitamins, and she closed her folder and said mediation was clearly not going to work here. That afternoon, I took Zara to her therapy appointment, and the therapist pulled me aside after to show me something Zara had drawn during their session. It was our family, but only 3 people. Me in the middle with Zara and Elijah on either side, all holding hands with big smiles, and when the therapist asked about Daddy and Grandma, Zara said they went away because she wasn't pretty enough. The therapist said Zara was starting to understand that what Grandma did was wrong, that taking medicine to change your skin color isn't normal or safe, and she'd even told another little girl in group therapy that brown skin is beautiful, just like her mommy's. 3 weeks after we'd left the hospital, things seemed stable until I woke up to Zara throwing up in the bathroom, her skin looking yellow again, and I drove her straight to the ER where blood tests showed her liver enzymes were 3 times normal. Dr. Maloney admitted her immediately and said this was expected, that recovery from this level of poisoning isn't linear, that Zara's liver was still damaged and would have good days and bad days for months, maybe years. They kept her for 2 days adjusting medications, adding new supplements to help her liver heal, changing doses of other drugs, and warning me we might see more setbacks like this. Elijah stayed with my friend Cindy while I slept in the hospital chair again, and when I picked him up, he didn't even ask how Zara was, just got in the car with his backpack, like this was normal life now. The next supervised visit was scheduled for that Saturday, but Theodore never showed up, and the supervisor called his phone 3 times before giving up and documenting it as a no-show. That night, Ashley posted Instagram photos of her and Theodore at some winery 2 hours away, holding glasses and smiling like they didn't have a care in the world, and I screenshot everything before she could delete it. Evie filed a motion Monday morning about Theodore abandoning his visitation and violating the custody agreement by being with Ashley when he was supposed to be with his kids, and she said the judge would not be happy about this. Lucas called that same week to tell me the criminal trial was set for 3 months out, and Mackenzie's lawyer was already trying to delay it, claiming they needed more time to prepare her defense. He warned me it would be brutal, that they'd try to make me look like a bad mother, claim I neglected Zara's health, maybe even suggest I had something to do with it, but he said the evidence was so strong that no jury would buy it. Mackenzie's lawyer was pushing for a mental health defense, saying she had some kind of disorder that made her do this, trying to avoid jail time with probation and treatment instead. Meanwhile, I had to figure out school for the kids since we couldn't go back to their old schools from Cindy's neighborhood, so I found 2 schools near our temporary place that had spots available mid-year. Elijah's new teacher was young and excited to have him, and when I explained privately about what we'd been through, she promised to watch for any signs he was struggling. Zara's teacher was older, grandmother type, and when I told her about the medical needs, the possible absences for appointments, the medication Zara needed at lunch, she just patted my hand and said she'd had students with much worse, and not to worry. Elijah made friends the first week, 3 boys who invited him to play basketball at recess, and seeing him laugh with other kids instead of sitting alone made me cry in my car after pickup. My sister flew in the next week from Colorado, taking time off from her nursing job to help us get organized, and having her there felt like I could breathe for the first time in months. She set up a whole system with colored folders for medical records, legal documents, insurance papers, school forms, everything labeled and organized so I could find what I needed fast. She made a medicine schedule for Zara with alarms on my phone, a chart on the fridge, backup supplies in labeled bags, and even taught Elijah how to recognize if Zara was having a reaction. Theodore's brother called while she was there, saying the family was horrified by what Mackenzie did, that they had no idea she was poisoning Zara, and asking if they could still see the kids. His sister texted too, saying she'd always thought something was off with her mother but never imagined this, and both of them offered to help with money, babysitting, whatever we needed. I agreed to let Theodore's sister visit with supervision because she'd always been kind to the kids, and Zara especially loved her, but I said it had to be at a neutral location with me present the whole time. 6 weeks passed, and I watched Zara coloring at the kitchen table, her skin back to its natural beautiful brown tone that matched mine. fine. She looked up and smiled, a real smile this time, not the forced ones from before. Mommy, I'm glad the medicine candy is gone, she said while drawing. It always made my tummy hurt, but Grandma said beauty needs sacrifice. I hugged her tight and told her she was perfect exactly as she was. The next morning, Evie called to say the divorce proceedings were starting, and Theodore was demanding joint custody. She warned me Kirk was arguing that since no charges had been filed against Theodore yet, he should keep his parental rights. We prepared for weeks, gathering medical records and witness statements. The custody hearing came 2 weeks later, and I sat in the courtroom watching Dr. Maloney take the stand. She explained in clear terms how the glutathione overdose was deliberate and sustained over months. She showed the judge charts of Zara's liver enzyme levels and said someone had to ignore obvious symptoms of toxicity to keep giving those doses. The way Zara scratched herself until she bled while saying she wanted to be white makes me wonder how deep this poison went into her mind, not just her body. The judge took notes while she described how close Zara came to needing a transplant. Theodore's turn came next, and at first he stuck to Kirk's script about being a loving father who made mistakes. But when Evie asked him directly if he knew the pills were hurting Zara, something broke in him. He started crying and admitted he knew they were wrong, but was scared of losing his family if Ashley found out about their problems. The judge's face showed pure disgust as Theodore sobbed about choosing between his daughter's health and keeping up appearances. She denied his custody petition right there in the courtroom. 2 months after everything exploded, Lucas called while I was making dinner. Mackenzie had agreed to a plea deal for 5 years in prison with 3 years probation after. He said it wasn't enough for what she did, but it guaranteed she'd serve time instead of risking a trial verdict. I hung up feeling both relieved and angry that 5 years was all she'd get for nearly killing my baby. A week later, Lucas called again with news about Dr. Kim. She'd lost her medical license and got 2 years in prison plus huge fines. Several other parents had come forward saying she gave them dangerous advice about skin lightening for their children too. The case was bigger than just us now. Meanwhile, Zara's weekly blood tests kept showing improvement, and finally, 3 months after the hospital, her liver function stabilized enough that the doctor said she wouldn't need a transplant. She'd need monitoring for years and might have complications later, but for now she was out of immediate danger. I cried in the parking lot after that appointment, finally able to breathe without the constant fear of losing her. Theodore showed up at Evie's office the next week with papers. He was signing away his parental rights in exchange for reduced child support. He said he knew he'd failed as a father, and this was the first honest thing he'd done in years. I felt angry, but also relieved the kids wouldn't be forced to see him anymore. With the legal battles settling, I focused on finding us a real home. The apartment I found was tiny, just 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, but with my freelance income and help from Theodore's siblings, we could afford it. The kids each got their own room, which felt like a huge victory after months of sleeping in my friend's basement. Elijah picked the smaller room because it had a window facing the basketball court. Zara decorated hers with drawings she'd made during her recovery. Moving day came, and Theodore's brother and sister helped us carry boxes while Theodore stayed away. They'd been sending money every month and checking on the kids, horrified by what their mother had done. During one of Elijah's therapy sessions, his therapist pulled me aside with good news. He was making remarkable progress, learning to express his emotions instead of shutting down like before. That night at dinner, Elijah looked at me and said something that made me cry. Mom, I'm glad you fought for Zara because now I know you'd fight for me too if something bad happened. I reached across our tiny kitchen table and squeezed his hand, telling him I'd always fight for both of them no matter what. 3 months passed before Mackenzie's sentencing date arrived, and we all had to go to the courthouse downtown. I dressed both kids in their nicest clothes even though Zara kept pulling at her collar and saying it was too tight. The courtroom was smaller than I expected with hard wooden benches that made Elijah squirm every few minutes. Mackenzie stood at the front in an orange jumpsuit that made her look older and smaller at the same time. She cried when the judge asked if she had anything to say, claiming she only wanted to help her granddaughter be beautiful and accepted. The judge didn't buy it and said poisoning a child for cosmetic reasons was unconscionable before sentencing her to 5 years in state prison. Theodore wasn't there, but his siblings sat behind us, and his sister squeezed my shoulder when Mackenzie was led away in handcuffs. That night, both kids crawled into my bed without asking, and we stayed up talking about how our family looked different now, but we were still complete. Zara said she didn't miss Daddy or Grandma because they made her feel wrong for how she looked, and Elijah nodded and said we were better without people who hurt us. The next morning, my phone rang, and it was my old boss from the marketing firm offering me a remote position with flexible hours for Zara's medical needs. It was a step down from senior management to regular account coordinator, but the stability meant everything, so I accepted immediately and started crying after I hung up. 6 months after everything exploded, Zara was finally thriving in therapy, and her liver function tests came back normal for the 3rd month in a row. She proudly told everyone at the school that her brown skin was beautiful, just like her mom's, and announced she wanted to be a doctor to help other kids who got sick. Her teacher called me one day to say Zara had given a presentation about liver disease that made half the class want to become doctors too. Meanwhile, Elijah joined the school basketball team and asked me to come to every single game, even the practice scrimmages. Watching him laugh with his teammates and high-five the coach, I realized he was finally just getting to be a regular kid instead of the boy who watched his sister almost die over and over. Theodore had moved across the country to Seattle with Ashley by then, only sending occasional checks that were always late, and birthday cards the kids never opened. His family stayed involved though, with his brother taking Elijah to basketball practice twice a week, and his sister babysitting when I had to work late. One evening I stood in the doorway of our tiny living room watching my children play a board game together on the floor. Zara's laughter filled the space where terror and medical equipment used to live just months before. We weren't unscathed since medical bills kept coming, and therapy sessions ate up our Saturdays, and Zara still needed liver monitoring every few months, but we were safe and we were together, and we were building something better than what we'd lost. Later that night, as I tucked them into their beds in our small apartment, Zara grabbed my hand and told me she loved her brown skin now. Elijah called out from his room that he was proud of me for saving his sister and making the bad people go away. We'd lost so much, including money and family and the life we'd planned when they were babies, but sitting there between their rooms in our cramped hallway, I knew we'd gained something precious that nobody could take away. We were enough exactly as we were, and nobody would ever make my children feel otherwise again. Thanks for hanging in there with me through all my questions and wondering. It's always interesting exploring this stuff together. Until we meet again, I'll catch you later. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.